Hello, today we're going to be looking at drawing techniques to go with your drawing unit in our Intro to 2D class at Zionsville High School. You have probably already opened that PowerPoint and have had a little bit of review on what the lightness or darkness of an object is, value, and then how we gradually change from one value to another with no abrupt changes. That's talking about the gradation of our element of value. We have some techniques for you to do. If you notice here, it says drawing pencils and pen. You may end up with drawing pencils back in your kits. Again, you're looking for pencils that have H's. 2 H's would be great for this exercise because they will keep a nice point. So you could do all of these in that 2H pencil, very sharp and nice and pointy. You may even do these with your mechanical pencil. Might be a little trickier on the modeling one, but the mechanical pencil will keep and retain a nice fine point, which will be great for doing some of these other techniques. Another option your teachers may throw at you is going to be a pen. This is my particular favorite pen for drawing with pen. This is a Uniball black pen. So I will try to interchangeably mix up some of these tools in order to create our images for today. This first one should look familiar, using only pencil weights to smoothly transition from one value to another. We're talking about modeling there. So a few reminders. I want to hold back on the heel end of the pencil. I can look at where we've placed that cast shadow, and I can kind of imagine a highlight going in this area right here, meaning the rest of my sphere will end up with some value. So I'm going to have that kind of crescent moon sort of idea, transitioning value to value. I'm just going to quickly try to get something in for this one. I probably would use my kneaded eraser, much like we did in the observational rendering video on drawing that sphere. I think I'm giving enough contrast for the camera to pick up some value. I am leaving the white of the paper, but if I remember correctly, the camera has a little tendency to not pick up all of that delicate value. So I'm gonna go a little bit darker where I am using some of the pencil and get just a smidge more contrast. Again, I am using a 2H pencil for this, so it's gonna stay a little bit on the light side, but I just kind of want to put something in here that reminds me of that page that we did when we did our observational rendering. Cast shadow is going to be a pretty decent dark with the 2H. I'm going to knuckle up on the pencil, but notice I'm holding the side of the pencil so that I get a nice flat value here. I don't want to see a bunch of streaky, pointy stroke marks and dents in the paper. So I think in terms of what we've done in the past, this should be great for you. Very easy to flip back to your observational rendering and take a look at how to keep going to get a really nice gradation of value, a nice contrast between highlight and form shadow. Okay, my next technique, I think I'm gonna work left to right, and then the center. I'm gonna be using dots. What is that one called? If you take a look on your slides, you're gonna see that that's called stippling. I'll let you write these in here later. All right. With stippling, the more dots I put into the image, I'm going to use the black pen so you can definitely see the dotting that I'm doing. The closer the dots are together, the darker the area is going to look. So if I'm doing the cast shadow, I want to do a ton of dots, really tight, really, really close together to create that illusion of a black or an almost black. So this one takes a little while. If you're working on this in the classroom, you may find you want to fold your workbook back so that this can be an only page, meaning there's nothing underneath it. Like right now, I've got the other pages underneath it. I might get a little bit more tight and light lines if I put a little more hard surface underneath the pen versus putting a soft surface under there. I'm gonna get a little more bleed and a little more bounce with the paper. So to do my darks, I might put some pages or something underneath the pen while I'm working so that that'll fill a little faster. But up near that highlight, I barely want to have any pen marks. So I'm just going to kind of do a few dots. I also, on this one, recommend to students that you avoid starting to work with your hand really attached to the table, because you'll start to see you'll make a pattern, kind of a linear pattern with it if you're not moving your hand much more than one direction. So you may even want to turn your arm as you go. But the idea here, again, is I am going to build more dots where I want the image to look darker. So I know my transition is going to be right through here someplace. So I may go ahead and keep building up to about that equator or that halfway mark in my sphere. And then as I keep building, I'm going to start looking for places where I'm more open into my core shadow. So the core shadow area being like right through this zone right here. So I'm going to build a little more darkness, kind of turn the arm so that I don't start making an organized row of dots, and I can kind of keep a really nice sense of how much density I have in a certain place and how much I don't. So as we keep going with that, if I kind of laid into it a little bit more, I would start to maybe build up a little more sense of transition into that area of that core shadow. I feel like it could get just a smidge softer. Okay. All right, so if you need to pause to kind of get that one done, I know I work pretty quickly. Key elements on here, again, just really try to avoid putting very many dots any place near your highlight. Like I literally have this whole zone right here with white touching right up to the edge. I've got one kind of stray dot right there. Maybe I could have even left that out, but I want to try to start having some transitions into my darker values. Okay, again, you can pause if you need a little bit of time to catch up on that. I did the pen with the stippling. I think this one, the technique of shading with a series of fine parallel lines, I think I'm going to do that with a mechanical pencil, just in case you are in a classroom where you don't have the ability to use pens, or maybe you're not using ballpoint pens. If you happen to have a ballpoint pen with you, you could potentially use that as well. Okay, so this next one that we already mentioned, I'm going to use a mechanical pencil. I'm going to be looking for a series of fine parallel lines. I kind of want to make sure that we're thinking about parallel. Often we're thinking straight lines, right? Like a straight line here is parallel to a straight line here. I would like to encourage everyone to kind of think about the idea of this being a sphere, not a flat circle. So with that, I may start to think about like a equator coming through. I don't know if I drew that too light. Maybe I did. So if I have an equator kind of coming through, that equator would end up arcing a little bit as it goes around the form. So what I'm going to start to think about doing is, as I put lines in, where I want this form to look darker, I'm going to let those lines build up. Now, I could work a little slower and a little more precise and get a little bit of a cleaner sort of sense to this. I am rushing to get your video done, but also I do want to just kind of give you a sense of the goal of the piece and what we're trying to do in these techniques. So the idea here, I could use pencil weight, so I could even do lighter lines as I come up. Maybe I end up even with a little bit of a rounded shape. I don't like the arc on this line, so I'm going to fix it. It's driving me a little bit crazy. So you may end up using some pencil weight, like how much pressure you're putting on the pencil line as you draw it. Or you may go flat out, kind of like what that pen is going to do. So you may end up with some lines. I kind of changed my direction right through there. I may even end up with lines that just kind of partially go into the form, and maybe they don't connect all the way. So what I mean by that is, like, I may end up with a line stopping here and then one starting here, so that it keeps the illusion of light in that top part of that sphere. On the table, my table would be flat, so my casted shadow on here, I could do some straight lines. Again, I could keep the pencil weight similar to what I did in the drawing, or I might press harder if I'm using a mechanical pencil so that I get a darker sense of value in there. So I should have something that kind of gives me a sense of light and shadow that looks similar to this, that looks similar to this, but yet is drawn with lines. Okay. I'm going to do this next one with my H pencil again, back to the pencil that I used for this first example, just in case all you have is a wood pencil that needs to be sharpened in a pencil sharpener. Just try to use an H if you have one, a 2H. An HB can kind of work. The B makes it a little bit softer, so you may find your line quality will change a little bit as you're doing the drawing. But this way I can just kind of demonstrate how different pencils can still give you some beautiful results in your drawing. So this one, the technique I want to use is where I'm going to overlap and create lines that kind of twist and turn that are not in any kind of a consistent pattern. All right, and that's called scumbling. So what do I mean by twisting and turning? I'm going to do a little bigger sort of, actually I'm going to do it in pens so I know you can see it. A scumble, if I did something like this, but I did it a lot tighter, where I kind of crisscross and overlap an area with a line that just continues to move the whole time. But I'm going to do that about a quarter of the size of how I just drew it. So as I come in, again, that concept of filling up the area with more lines or more darkness to become the shadow, that's going to create the illusion of the dark for the form, right? So I'm keeping my pencil weight all about the same right now, and I'm just kind of building up a darker zone by constantly moving that pencil. Now, as I want to approach a lighter value, I could lighten up the pressure of how hard I'm pressing on the paper. That's going to lighten the line up, But another thing that does is it makes the pencil kind of skip. So as I'm making heavy contact with the paper, the pencil stays down on the paper with every stroke direction that I make. But as you lift your hand up a little bit or lighten that pressure up a little bit, you may notice your pencil kind of lifts off the paper as you're working. So you get some lines on the paper and then some lines that didn't end up on the paper. And so that creates kind of this spacing. So as you're looking, you may see like a line right here and then nothing around it, and a little bit of a line right there and nothing nearby or around it. That's going to kind of create a really nice sort of sense of gradient by putting some space between those marks that you're making with the scumbled technique. So again, my casted shadow is going to be the darkest area. And I'm just going to do a lot more lines so that I get the illusion of a casted shadow. Okay. My last technique down at the bottom, I'm basically looking at a very similar thing to my hatching. This one, we're going to be cross hatching. So look for that term, crossed lines. I think I'll do this in pen just to kind of show you. Pen is permanent. Pen you can't erase. Pen you can't take back. So I can't put lines in and then eraser them out like I did a little bit of that with this hatch example. So with my cross hatching, again, I may kind of want to just barely touch that paper, kind of like with the scumble, so that I keep a pretty light line in place. And I may start with curved lines. I know I'm going to want for the base where this is darkest. I know I'm going to need more lines in this zone that follow the form left to right or from the top left to the bottom right. But I'm also going to be using lines that go the other way. And so as I do that, I'm kind of also following the form, but I'm following the form as if I took this equator and I turned it on the diagonal. I am a very loose contour line sketcher. When I work in pen, I do some cross hatching like this, and I have a very loose sort of flowy kind of line in the way that I work with it. Some people stay very precise and these look like some kind of typography map. But again, as long as you're filling up the sense of where you want the darks to go, that's what's going to give it the illusion of light and shadow, right? So even as I take some of these edges in, as if I bring some lines up here, my lines may not completely finish across the form. I may have some that end a little bit short or maybe don't follow through all the way up to the top. I'm trying to get one right there to finish out. There we go. So I may have some crossing lines, but then I may have some that don't end up following through. And that concept again is that I'm crossing lines off the form. So I'm kind of starting to get the illusion of light here, a mid-tone here. I think I want to build up my edges just a little bit more. So I'm going to do some shorter lines on the sides so that I still kind of get that illusion of that arc. Like the arc of the dark, the arc of the dark. I'm still trying to kind of create that sense of that without overworking the form. So if I kind of come in and I just layer some more lines through that zone, I'm going to start to build that. I might have taken that one up a little bit too high. Okay. So you saw how I kind of built that. You can try doing something similar. Again, does it have to be in a pen just because I'm using a pen? No. You can use a pencil that's really sharp to do this one. You could use a mechanical pencil. I think I kind of just want to throw a little bit more right through there. All right. So I'm going to kind of end with that. My cast shadow on the table. The table's flat, so I'm going to do some flat horizontal lines, and then I may work on a diagonal. I could work a vertical line, whatever I feel like doing, but the idea is I'm going to be doing the crisscrossing to create that. I do like the look of a few little tiny white areas that maybe still show up from those crisscrosses to kind of help show a little bit more sense of the fact that I'm using a particular technique where I am crisscrossing the lines. If I fill it in solid, it's going to give a little bit of a different look to the cast shadow than how the form is rendered. Okay, so if you didn't fill these in as we went, this is cross hatching. Did I use this pencil? I think so. Yeah. This is scumbling. I think I used this for this pencil. This is hatching. This is stippling. And you should know this one, modeling. All right, so keep continuing on, finish these studies, and then we should be moving into dimension and some more vocabulary before we move to the next page, which is some really good fun with color media, color pencil, oil pastel, and then we'll be looking at pen and line control, as well as chalk pastels.